Donald Trump has fired the first shot, slapping a 25% tariff on Indian goods, warning of even harsher penalties for buying oil and weapons from Russia. It's a bold move with massive stakes. Indian exporters are stunned, trade talks are teetering, and the timing? Explosive. Just as Washington squeezes New Delhi, Trump is cozying up to Pakistan with a brand new oil deal. It's not just about tariffs anymore. It's about power, pressure, and shifting alliances. And as the August 1st deadline looms, India's $130 billion trade relationship with the US is hanging by a thread, with global consequences waiting on the other side. On July 25th, Donald Trump took to Truth Social and dropped a bombshell. Starting August 1st, Indian goods entering the US would face a 25% tariff. And that's just the beginning. Trump also hinted at an additional, undefined penalty for India's close energy and defense ties with Russia, raising the stakes without offering clarity. His message was typed in all caps, packed with urgency and aggression, making it clear this was no routine trade adjustment. The 25% tariff could hit over $88 billion worth of Indian exports, slamming key sectors like pharmaceuticals, electronics, auto components, jewelry, and textiles. These industries are deeply tied to the US market, where India enjoys competitive access. That advantage could vanish overnight. Indian exporters are already feeling the pressure. Orders from American buyers are slowing down as companies brace for impact. The timing is critical. India's peak export season begins in October, and uncertainty is freezing deals before they start. But what really shocked many wasn't just the tariff itself. It was how quickly the situation escalated, without warning, without a deal, and without regard for the months of negotiations that had been quietly underway. As businesses scramble for answers, Trump's messaging leaves no doubt. This is economic warfare, and India is now on the front lines. So why is India suddenly in Trump's crosshairs? It starts with oil, weapons, and a decades-old friendship with Russia. Despite pressure from the West, India has continued to buy discounted Russian crude, importing over 1.7 million barrels per day in 2024 alone. That's more than any other country besides China. Add to that India's position as Russia's biggest arms customer, and the picture becomes clearer. From fighter jets to missile systems, a large chunk of India's military hardware still comes from Moscow. But there's another layer: BRICS. India is a founding member of the economic bloc alongside Russia, China, Brazil, and South Africa. The group has been pushing for trade in local currencies, building alternatives to the US-dominated financial system. Trump sees this as a direct threat. He even said, BRICS was set up to kill the dollar, and warned that any country in the alliance would face a 10% tariff just for being a member. For Trump, India's actions aren't just about trade. They challenge US power on multiple fronts. And as he piles on penalties, it's becoming clear this isn't just punishment for oil deals. It's about sending a message to every country questioning the global economic order led by Washington. Beneath the tough talk and tariff threats, there's a clear goal: market access. For years, the US has pushed India to lower its barriers for American products, especially in agriculture. Trump is now turning up the heat, demanding that India open its doors to genetically modified soybeans and corn, along with dairy products, meat, and processed foods. These sectors are powerful in US politics and have long eyed India's massive consumer base. He's also targeting automobiles and alcoholic beverages. India currently imposes import duties of up to 125% on foreign whiskey and over 60% on passenger vehicles. Trump wants those slashed, fast. But here's the catch. Agriculture in India isn't just another industry. It supports over 40% of the population, and small farmers are seen as the backbone of rural India. Opening the floodgates to subsidized US farm goods could spark political backlash in an election year. That's why India is offering gradual, quota-based access like it did in its trade deal with the UK. But that pace doesn't suit Trump's aggressive timeline. His strategy now seems to be: apply pressure, escalate if needed, and force India into a corner, one where compromise looks better than confrontation. But the risk is that pressure may break more than it bends. The impact on India's exporters was immediate. In Mumbai, Ahmedabad, and Chennai, cities that form the backbone of India's export engine, buyers from the US have begun pressing pause. With no clarity on final tariff rates, many are freezing new orders. Factories that once ran around the clock for American clients are now idling, waiting for answers that haven't come. And the timing couldn't be worse. October marks the beginning of India's vital fall-winter export season, when orders typically spike across sectors like textiles, auto parts, electronics, and pharmaceuticals. But with the 25% tariff looming and the threat of added penalties, the entire season is now at risk. Worse still, Indian suppliers are finding it harder to compete globally. As US-China tensions escalate, Chinese manufacturers are offloading excess inventory into Europe at deep discounts. This is squeezing India out of not just the US market, but also the EU, where demand is already weak. Exporters who rely on bulk orders from both regions are now stuck between high tariffs on one side and collapsing margins on the other. India's goods exports fell 7% year-over-year in June, and officials fear that number could worsen sharply if the situation drags on. Many small and mid-sized exporters, already burdened by rising input costs, are now staring at delayed payments, canceled contracts, and even job losses. What began as a policy dispute is quickly spiraling into a full-blown trade shock, one that threatens to push India's $450 billion export sector into uncharted territory. India's response has been firm but measured. The Commerce Ministry released a short statement saying it had taken note of the US decision and was closely examining its economic impact. Officials emphasized that India remains committed to a fair and balanced trade relationship, but made one thing clear: protecting domestic interests comes first. That means MSMEs, farmers, and small entrepreneurs, groups most exposed to trade shocks, are being prioritized. Government sources have hinted that any deal must shield these sectors from sudden market disruption. Agriculture, in particular, remains off the table for now, with Delhi unwilling to make quick concessions on politically sensitive commodities. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, negotiations continue. A sixth round of trade talks is set for mid-August, with a US delegation expected to land in New Delhi. But time is running short. The 25% tariff hits on August 1st, and India is still trying to assess whether the US is open to compromise or simply turning up the pressure. There's also concern about escalation. The penalty Trump referenced remains undefined, leaving Indian officials on edge. Without clarity, they're walking a tightrope, trying to keep talks alive while preparing for what could be a deeper economic confrontation. The political backlash at home was swift. Opposition leaders accused Prime Minister Modi of mishandling ties with Trump, blaming his personal diplomacy for the tariff crisis. The Congress Party pointed to the 2019 Howdy Modi event, saying the Prime Minister campaigned for Trump, only to be met now with penalties. MP Jairam Ramesh called it a betrayal, while Malu Ravi went further, saying Trump's actions felt more like threats than trade policy. She warned that India must respond with strength, reminding Washington that this is a sovereign nation of over 1.4 billion people, not a market to be bullied without consequence. Just hours after hitting India with steep tariffs, Trump shifted attention to Pakistan, this time with a surprising offer. In a Truth Social post, he announced a new joint initiative to help Pakistan develop its massive oil reserves in partnership with a US energy firm. The statement was vague, but one part stood out. Trump floated the idea that Pakistan could someday sell oil to India. Coming right after trade penalties on New Delhi, the timing raised eyebrows in both capitals. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar quickly confirmed that a deal had been concluded, calling it a breakthrough after months of talks. Just last week, Dar met with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio to finalize the terms. While no specific details were shared, no company names, no production timelines, the symbolism was loud and clear. Trump had just punished India and rewarded its regional rival. For Indian officials already trying to manage rising tensions, this move added a new layer of complexity. It wasn't just about tariffs anymore. It was about positioning. The idea of Pakistan gaining American investment while India faces penalties sent a strong message. Washington is willing to shift the balance even in South Asia. And that message won't be forgotten in New Delhi. Senator Lindsey Graham poured fuel on the fire with a fiery statement that raised the temperature even higher. Speaking to Fox News, he warned that President Trump would impose 100% tariffs on any country still buying Russian oil. He named India, China, and Brazil directly, blaming them for keeping Moscow's war machine alive. Together, these three countries now account for over 75% of Russia's crude exports, according to the International Energy Agency. Graham didn't hold back, calling their purchases blood money and saying, "We'll tear the hell out of your economy if they continue." His words weren't just aimed at foreign leaders. They were also meant to signal America's growing frustration with global fence-sitters. As the West tries to isolate Russia over the war in Ukraine, Washington is now threatening harsh economic retaliation against even its largest trading partners. For India, already hit with a 25% tariff, the threat of a full 100% duty now looms in the background. Trump didn't stop at Russian oil. He also targeted BRICS directly, calling it a group set up to kill the dollar. In a sharp statement, he warned that any country in BRICS, including India, would face a 10% tariff just for being a member. No trade violation, no specific behavior. Membership alone would trigger penalties. His message was clear. Efforts to build alternative financial systems or weaken dollar dominance would be met with economic retaliation. With BRICS Plus expanding and discussing its own payment platform, Washington now sees the bloc as more than a trade group. It's viewed as a strategic threat to U.S. power. Despite all the tension, the U.S. and India remain deeply connected, and neither side can afford a complete breakdown. For Washington, India plays a critical role in the shifting global supply chain. As tensions with China grow, American companies are urgently looking for safer alternatives. India is one of the top destinations. Apple has already shifted over 12% of its iPhone production to India, with plans to expand further. Other tech giants are following. Semiconductor investments, electronics assembly, and clean energy supply chains are being restructured. And India is a key part of that new map. That's why Trump's 25% tariff plan could backfire. Many of the products now made in India are tied directly to U.S. companies. Higher tariffs won't just hit Indian exporters. They'll hurt American businesses too. Electronics, smartphones, and consumer goods assembled in India will become more expensive in the U.S., cutting into profits and raising prices for consumers. U.S. firms that moved operations to India to reduce dependency on China now face a new layer of uncertainty. The U.S. also sees India as a vital strategic partner in Asia. As part of the Quad alliance, India helps balance China's influence across the Indo-Pacific. Military cooperation is at an all-time high, with joint naval drills, defense tech sharing, and co-production agreements on the rise. Later this year, Trump is expected to attend a major defense summit in New Delhi, possibly under the Quad banner. Behind the scenes, officials are hopeful that a broader trade reset could emerge from that visit. India, on the other hand, relies heavily on U.S. market access. America is now India's second-largest trading partner, with bilateral goods trade crossing $130 billion last year. Around $88 billion of that is exports from India to the U.S., and much of it comes from high-value sectors like pharmaceuticals, auto parts, textiles, and electronics. Losing ground in the American market wouldn't just dent revenue, it could slow down job creation, investment, and broader economic momentum. That's why, even as the tariff clock ticks, both sides are still talking. For all the tough rhetoric, there's still recognition in Washington and New Delhi that this relationship is too important to abandon. But with each passing day, the cost of delay keeps rising. August 1st is almost here. There's still no deal, no clear answers, and the pressure keeps growing. A 25% tariff is already in place. BRICS penalties could be next. And Trump is still threatening more sanctions over Russia. So India is in a tough spot right now. What began as a trade negotiation is spiraling into a geopolitical standoff. The question now is simple. Who backs down first, and how much damage will be done before that happens? If you want to stay ahead of the sharpest global shifts, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation.